Well, my name is John Holly. What brings me here today is my multi-generational connection to Pyrmont, being not just my immediate family but also my forebears. I was born in Perdition in March 1937 to Alexander, known as Wall, and Winston Lysenko. We lived at 77 Kings Road, Five Dock. There it is. Went there 2 days ago. The family sold the house. I can't remember exactly when, but it was £8,000. Today, they're talking 3-point-something million for the same house. I can't believe it. It's just mind-boggling. Anyway, okay. It was the home of my grandfather, Peter Lysenko, who worked as a painter and docker on Sydney's wharves. In May 1946, my father, Wold, was killed at the intersection of Parramatta and Great North Roads, Five Dock, riding his push bike to work. He was just 34 years old or aged, and I was 9. Soon after this tragic event, my mother moved my sister, brother and I out of Peter's home in Five Dock to live with her mother and father, Ted and Louisa, known as Louis Robinson, to North Kirkville. My first connection to Pyrmont occurred soon after this, when my mother began working at Castrol Oil Company, which at that time was located in the Wakefield building in Miller Street, Pyrmont, which is now occupied by a Woolworths supermarket, and I think upstairs is the Building Workers Union as well. Many years later, she was able to arrange a job for my sister at Castrol too. Wakefield, by the way, was an oil company, and so was Castrol. My mother remarried in December 1957, and we gained a stepfather named Len Holly. My mother, Michael, and I took on Len's surname, Holly.
Your brother, Michael.
Sorry, my brother, Michael, and I took on Len's surname, Holly. And I retained a connection to my biological father by adopting Lysenko as my middle name. I always thought that it was Russian, but of course, lately I've worked it out, he was Ukrainian. How he got out here, no idea. He must have known something. My wife said he was a very clever man. I think he might have got on the train, or built the train, the Trans-Siberian, which I have been on. I married in Melbourne in 1960 to my wife Barbara, who is here today. The house that I grew up in Five Dock remains within the family following my grandfather's, Peter's, death. So for the first 5 years of our marriage, Barbara and I lived in this house. You see there, 77?
The number.
I made that. I made that as a foreign order at Cockatoo Docks. Still there. I couldn't believe it, but there it is. Okay. You look at it, 3-point-something million. Okay. Our first child, a son Andrew, was born during this period. In 1965, we relocated back to Melbourne, as I had promised Barbara's parents that we would return to her hometown to live. We settled in Melbourne from that point on and had twin girls, Fiona and Lisa, in 1966. Family history has always dominated my family's lives, our family's lives, with the early focus being on Barbara's third great-grandfather, George Augustus Robinson, the controversial protector of the First Nations people in Tasmania and Victoria. My family history was never discussed or shared with me until later in life, when my wife Barbara began to delve into my ancestral line. From the information he managed to squeeze out of my mother and grandfather, Ted, we were of the belief that I had a relation by the name of William Scott, a cabinet maker from Scotland who had a daughter by the name of Catherine. Found her the other day. Identical. This remained our belief until 12 months ago, when in 224 we began researching the Anzac story of my great uncle Robert Melville Robinson, brother of my grandfather Ted Robinson. More about Robert later. Ted and Robert's mother was indeed named Catherine Scott, but was not the daughter of a Scottish cabinet maker named William Scott. With diligent research and investigations, we were able to establish that our Catherine Scott was indeed my second connection to Pyrmont. Our Catherine was born in Pyrmont in 1856 and was the daughter of the highly respected shipwright, inventor and engineer James Scott. Very high. I could never work out about where Milton came from either, but I did later. Okay. We go to the painting, Frederick Garling's painting. Will be familiar with most people here today and depicts my third connection to Pyrmont, being the Pyrmont patent slip. I got caught out saying patience there at one stage, but anyway, patent slip. The site where the Pyrmont patent slip would eventually be built belonged to the Australian Steam Navigating Company, abbreviated as ASNC, a large shipping company that operated between 1839 to 1887. At its peak, ASNC operated 27 vessels, employed over 400 men, and operated within Australian colonies from King George Sound in Albany, Western Australia, easterly around and up the east coast as far as north as Bowen, near, I've got here, Mackay, Queensland. I understand that actually the reason why it looked pretty good is that he had the mail contract. Okay, shipping and shipping docks were the gateway to the rest of the world, and the infrastructure to support the shipping industry was considered to be the cutting edge of technology today. If you look carefully at that one down there, you'll see that relates to the painting of Frederick Garling. For example, the only way to travel from Sydney, from London to Sydney at this time was via passenger ship. This would take around 64 days, being 1,536 hours. Whereas today, an Airbus A380 takes approximately 17 and a half hours direct to the same journey, no stops. In essence, Sydney Harbour, Port Jackson of the 1850s were the equivalent of Sydney's International Airport today. ASNC determined that they required a modern patent slip at their property in Pyrmont, and in 1848 applied for government permission to lay down a slip on the northern end of Pyrmont Peninsula, which would also extend 300 feet out into Darling Harbour. With permission granted, ASNC dispatched their manager, Mr. Patterson, to the UK to engage a competent engineer and procure the required machinery. It was in Glasgow in February 1853 that my forebear, Mr. James Scott, was engaged by ASNC to travel to Australia and oversee the installation of his newly invented patent slip. James Scott arrived in Sydney in December 1853, together with his machinery to begin work at Pyrmont. Question: why chose James Scott? James Scott was born at Burt Island in Fife, Scotland in 1815. His official death registration states his father was a master mariner. In May 1845, it was documented that James returned from the sea to marry Margaret Melville. Again, that name comes in. The following year, in 1846, James partnered with a Mr. Murray in constructing a patent slip in Mauritius. In 1848, James exhibited a design of a hydraulic dock, winning him a silver medal. In 1850, he lodged a patent for this design. By the time ASNC engaged James Scott in 1853, he was highly regarded as an expert in his field, and it was obvious that shipping and all things maritime were embedded in his genes. Choosing the location in Pyrmont. Upon arriving in Sydney, James Scott surveyed the ASNC site at Darling Island and decided that the most suitable location for the slip was on the extreme north of the eastern promontory, the same area cited in 1848 application to extend into Darling Harbour. Looking at this 1854 map of Pyrmont, we can conclude from the information gathered, along with images depicted in paintings and photographs, that the site indicated was the location of the patent slip. The Frederick Garling painting shows the sandstone cliff face of Darling Point to the left, which was excavated to accommodate the patent slip. To the right is the smokestack of the engine room, used to haul the ships up the slip ramp. An excerpt from the 1855 Empire newspaper article observes, quoting, "Standing at the door of the machine house, facing the slip to the right side, hiding it from the view of the city, is a portion of the solid rock out of which the site had been excavated, while the boundary on the left side is the original coastline of Johnson's Bay." This 1860s survey map of Darling Island clearly shows the rail network and the engine room of the patent slip. If we superimpose the outline of the old Pyrmont shoreline over a current Google map image, we can conclude that the site of the slip was located at the current day Darling Island Wharf precinct. We were down there today. This 1850s photograph shows people picnicking on the top of MacArthur's Point, now Panorama Park. We were there today as well, overlooking Johnson's Bay, showing the patent slip carved into Darling Island and the Sydney city, in the background. I took a long look at that. Unbelievable. Construction of the Pyrmont patent slip began in March 1854 under the engagement of William Handel and was completed 13 months later in April 1855. Upon its completion, the slip measured approximately 260 metres in length, averaged 20 metres in width, weighed a total of 1,000 tonnes. In combination materials and cost, £60,000 to build, the equivalent of $12 million today. What made James Scott's patent slip so different? The most common way to repair and maintain a large sea ship-faring vessels at the time was by the use of a dry dock. A dry dock operates by floating a vessel into a narrow basin through open gates. The gates were then closed, the trapped water pumped out, leaving the ship dry and seated on blocks and chocks ready for works to be performed. In the early 1850s, patent slip technology was in its infancy, and basic systems operated by pulling a ship up an inclined ramp using a chain and winch combination. The principal feature that set James Scott's patent slip apart from all other was known as Scott's continuous action screw perches for slips. It was stated in the Practical Mechanicals Journal of February the 1st, 1854, and to quote, "A very elegant mechanical combination for working slips by an easy, continuous drawing action, whereby vessels may be drawn from the water and again let down into by a transverse movement, at once powerful, steady and convenient. Briefly stated, the process is the action of a united right and left threaded screw, where diversely acting iron screws, each about 18 inches in diameter and 9 feet in length, are joined and laid horizontally at the head of the slip." Put very simply, Scott's slip system utilised a worm drive action to extract ships from the water. Extract.
Yeah.
Okay, from the water, pulling them up an inclined rail line while seated on a movable carriage assembly. The other outstanding feature of James Scott's patent slip was the use of hydraulics. 2 to 3 tonnes of water pressure were pumped into large cylinders, raising pistons attached to a frame that the vessel was nestled on. Raising the vessel freed up the movable carriage, which could then be redeployed for use to extend other ships from the water. The raised ship would then be chocked and blocked, worked upon and then lowered back into the movable carriage and rolled back into the sea. It was noted that Scott's system was able to raise the 720-tonne HMS Akron in an hour and a half, obliterating the labour used with an old style of operation which would have occupied 200 men for 2 days. Technology. The PS Shamrock was the first ship raised on the Pyrmont patent slip, followed by the HMS Akron and the tug Ballarat. Tugs haven't changed much. If you look at that, they're not dissimilar to that. Yeah. 35 more ships were then raised on the slip over the following 5 months. So, worked a lot. James Scott remained in Pyrmont acting as a slip supervisor for several years following its completion. During this time, his reputation as a maritime expert continued to grow, and he was approached by the Victorian government regarding the construction of a patent slip at Williamstown, Hobson's Bay, which was a Navy post, still there actually, but doesn't do much work down there, in Melbourne. The New Zealand government also sought out its expertise in patent slip building and the use of hydraulics for raising sunken ships. In London, 1856, construction of a James Scott patented hydraulic lift began at Victoria Docks and completed 2 years later. This image shows the lift in action, raising a 600-tonne iron vessel in 35 minutes. I've got one of those as a jigsaw at home, and it's in black and white, so you can imagine it took a long bloody time to do. Absolutely amazing, isn't it? It's mesmerising. Now our James Scott moved. He moved to Stockton, Newcastle. Obviously, again, shipping port. To oversee the construction of the Stockton Patent Slip, which is an initiative of the government to improve the movement of coal extracted from the Minmire coal mines. In 1862, the Stockton Slip was employing 55 men. Records of the 1868 show that Scots were living at Beth Cottage, McCormick Street, Newcastle, located just a short boat ride across the port of Newcastle to Stockton Slip. Having been there as well, and that on the top there, okay, is the area where the Japanese bombed during the Second World War, I think 3 times. Got those back down there, always worried about it. Okay. Sadly in 1870, James Scott's wife Margaret passed away at the age of 52 years, and James moved back to Pyrmont later that year. Records show him residing at 20 Union Street, Pyrmont, during this time, which is now occupied by the Nouveau Hair Saloon. We were there today. Has anybody ever seen it? Yeah. Well, that's where he was. And he's painted somebody's painted the place all over the sandstone. I didn't think that would be allowed, but they do it. Anyway, we'll get into that. So it's near Union Square. As was the case in Stockton, it appeared James liked to live close to his constructions. Tragically, just 1 year after Margaret's death, James' second eldest child, James Jr., died in 1871, aged 21 years. Actually, he was a shipwright too. Yeah. Now, James Scott moved back to Scotland, and he remarried in 1873. You'll love this. His new bride's name was Jessie Dow Dollabane. Sounds almost a Southern American belle, doesn't it? And they produced a son named James John Scott in 1875. My fourth connection to Pyrmont occurred 4 years later, in 1879, when James Scott's eldest child, Robert Melville Scott, married Helena Chown, the daughter of the famous Pyrmont shipbuilding family. Chown's shipbuilders are best known for having built the first Manly ferry. Not a bad looking job, was it? In 1851. The Chown's shipyard was located at the end of Harris Street. Chown's Street, Pyrmont, which ran along the southern boundary of the shipyard parallel to Bowman Street, was named after the Chown family. The Chowns sold the shipyard land to the CSR in the 1870s. I wondered about the CSR. It used to be called the Colonial Sugar Refinery, which today I wouldn't think that would be acceptable. Not too sure. Commonwealth? Interesting. Okay. The name Helena continued along the Scott family tree as a tribute to Alina Chow. Robert and Alina appear to be a very caring couple, as the death records of Robert's sisters Margaret and Douglas showed that they were both living at Robert and Helena's when they passed away. James Scott died in 1884 in Helensburgh, Scotland, aged 69 years. His second wife, Jessie, with son John James, moved to Sydney, presumably to live closer to Jessie's sister, and arrived on board the ship Glengall in January 1886. James Scott may have left us, but his genes live on. James Scott's first son, Robert Melville, again Scott, was also an inventor and partnered with Alexander Goodsir to patent a drilling machine of submarine rock in 1897. James Scott's third son, James John Scott, son of Jessie, went on to become a marine engineer. So again, the pattern of being in this area, in this field. James Scott's grandson, Robert Melville Robinson, Ted's brother, son of our Catherine Scott, was born in Balmain in 1891, and he became an engineer, and he worked for Clyde Engineering. Robert enlisted in the AIF in May 1915 and assigned to the 18th Battalion. He landed at Gallipoli on the 16th of August, and in just a short 11 days, I thought it was 14, but it was only 11, was tragically killed in action during the Hill 60 campaign of the 27th of August 1915, aged 24. It was during the research of this brave Anzac that we uncovered my roots of James Scott. The medal there, my mother applied for it, okay, and we've kept it in the family. James Scott's great-great-grandson, John Lysenko Holly, who's looking at me, that's me, has also had a life filled with technical endeavours and maritime equipment. Little did I know my genes were at play when I took on my first job in the late 50s as a first-class sheet metal apprentice. That was the highest you could get it as an apprentice in that particular trade. I worked on warships in Cockatoo Docks. The one I worked at with the most was the Voyager, because it went down in a collision with the aircraft carrier Milton. I continued to work in the metal industry in both Sydney and Melbourne until 1972, when I became a teacher in the technical skills department of Victoria. In those days they had high schools, state schools, and they also had technical skills as well. They did away with technical skills, and a lot of people regret that to this day. We have not produced enough tradespeople. Okay, everybody wanted to be a professional. It was a mistake. In 1985, I was invited and accepted the position of Institute Lecturer at Hawthorn Institute of Education. In those days, they were the training centre for tech teachers. Becoming a team leader until my retirement in 1996. As I look back, even this last 3 days, riding the ferry across Sydney Harbour on my daily commute to work on the ships Ewing Balmain, Darling Harbour and Pyrmont, I was drawn to the area that my forebears had had such a big impact on its development. In conclusion, I would like to give a big thanks to all those involved in the research and the construction of this presentation. I would also like to thank everyone here today for listening to my story, my family story, the story of my great-great-grandfather, James Scott, an innovator who helped shape 19th century Pyrmont and worldwide maritime infrastructure. Thank you.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you so much for all those intersections in Pyrmont and the authentic and real research that you and your family have gone to, and it's very close to us. The James Scott Pyrmont Patent Switch.
Yeah.
It's in our website, and it's going to be enhanced following your presentation.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Any questions? John, can I just start, by noting that you worked at Cockatoo Island,
Yeah.
and in the late 50s.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about what life was like as a worker in the Cockatoo Islands in the the 1950s?
Well, it was a remarkable part of my life because it was my first job as an apprentice, and it was a learning apprenticeship as well, not just a trade, but learning about the idiosyncrasies of men, mainly, and the oddities of why men behave the way that they do. It was because I never had a father I really could ever remember. You with me? It was so the learning was a maturity of me as well as a growing up to be a man, as well as learning a trade. I used to walk around the island because you had a little bit of freedom in those days, but I never went upstairs to see the accommodation upstairs because men lived and families lived on the top of the island. Yeah, the administration upstairs was still out of bounds, if you like. The convicts, they built Cockatoo Dock, both the two dry docks that are there, Sutherland and Fitzroy, I think the two of them are called. And I used to walk around when they were actually putting ships in there to do a clean job or fix a propeller, or the case may be. So I learned a lot in Cockatoo Docks, but the remarkable thing I told Peter was that Cockatoo was one of the few, if not the only one in the world, that made everything. All the warships were made from the bottom to the top, inside, outside, the propellers. Everything was made at Cockatoo Docks. Absolutely, everything. And that was incredible. Things were brought in, of course, but then they were assembled like wire and things like that. How the Voyager went down, I don't know, because that ship had everything on it. Something was wrong with what can we say, human error that occurred when it actually clashed with the other ship. We don't know. Down in Jarvis Bay, doing night areas as well. So that was my learning. But I realised that I couldn't stay there because after a while you become rather inbred in the behaviour that occurs when people live on a job too long. In fact, my whole working life, I changed every 8 years. Yeah. Sometimes you get a tap on the shoulder, and sometimes you feel, well, there's an opportunity, I'll take it. Which was the one that I went to the Teachers College.
And what were the mechanics of getting there? Did you have to catch a ferry from Circular Quay?
When my mother moved over to North Curl, we'd either ride a bicycle to Manly Wharf or get the bus, then get the ferry across to the quay, and then get the other ferry up to Cockatoo Dock. Yeah, so it was a long day.
And did you work, 8 hours, 9 hours?
It was an 8 hour day.
8 hour day?
8 hour day.
And did you get paid in cash?
Yes, in those days you got it in an envelope. Yeah, and that was the story too about the probably the most interesting hold up. Some of you might remember it too. They held up the payroll of Cockatoo Dock. never found the money. It was an inside job, it had to be, because they buried where the money would go from. Could have gone from Balmain, it could have gone from Drummoyne, it could have gone from Woolwich, it could have gone from anywhere. But they were there waiting with guns, took the lot and disappeared. They never found who did it or the money. It was a lot of money. It was a payroll for the workforce on Cockatoo Docks. What else is on there? Sorry.
Thank you very much for a very interesting talk. That was absolutely fascinating. I have a question, but first I just want to say that Refinery Drive used to be called Chalmers Street. People probably know that. My question though is about this word patent in the title of patent slip. Is it because it was a new invention?
Yeah. I noticed the word patent is down there, you know, like they've got those tourist information, what can you say, history displays when you walk around the bottom part there of the Piedmont and Ultimo, okay, showing the history. That is mentioned a lot, but not James Scott. Yeah, it was him. That relates to the patent. Okay. So what you think when people read it is, oh, well, it's a patent. Was he a name or what? Well, it wasn't. A patent is something you take out as your invention, isn't it? Under license.
Yeah.
It's not mentioned anywhere. Yeah. So all this was, like I said, for these people there 12 months ago, wouldn't have had a clue. Would not have had a clue. Going to work, I had no idea about my family at all. Yeah, so it was an eye-opener, the last 12 months. And the last 3 days.
Just picking up, Norma, would you like to say a few words about your process? Or?
Because I've become completely and utterly infatuated with everyone else's family history, starting with my husband's and then moving on. And I discovered after looking at Fiona's family history what her mother had already sort of ascertained sometime, this real connection to George Augustus Robinson. And I thought, to be fair, that I really needed to look at John's history as well. And I knew that John's mother's name was quite distinctive, Elaine Winsome Robinson, who name she was given at birth. And her father was called Charles Edward Robinson. And at that stage, I thought, oh gosh, you know, there's more than one Charles Edward Robinson in Sydney at this stage. Unless I start spending a lot of money in New South Wales BDMs, this is a bit of dead end. And then we happened to be with John and Barbara in April, and John produced the photo of the monument at Gallipoli and said, oh, this is, you know, my grandfather's brother, Robert Melville Robinson. And I knew instantly that there was a really big clue here, and I recognised it was likely to be a Scottish name. And so I started searching madly, and the digital newspapers on Trove at the National Library are just absolutely critical, I've found, to any of this research, because every year from 1917 on to 1946, when Robert Melville Robinson's own father died, the family put an in memoriam notice in the Sydney Morning Herald.
Yep.
And that told me the names of his sisters and his brother Ted, John's grandfather.
And that's that Melville comes in all the time.
And that Melville and the continuation that is particularly a Scottish tradition. And so again, the newspapers led me to the fact that Catherine Scott, John's Catherine Scott, not the William daughter, that in fact she was from Stockton originally, and the use of Stockton recurred all the time in talking about the family. And then an obituary for her mother referring to Mr. James Scott of the patent slip. And I too thought, like, what is a patent slip? And so then I discovered that he'd returned to Sydney and the word Piedmont patent slip. And then it all began to fall into place. And it was really only when I had basically trawled the newspapers and obtained death records from New South Wales for the details of Catherine Scott or Catherine Robinson's death notice, death registration, and her mother's, that all the connections to Scotland, and then I just kept using mainly newspapers, but Scottish records, which are extraordinarily good, and a lot of potted history. Peter helped me. Michael Matthews' book was very useful to me, and the State Library resources as well. And I just put the whole picture together then, and could say to John, "You're looking at the wrong Catherine Scott, John. This one is your Catherine Scott." And that's how I did it. So,
Norma, tell us about the patent slip, the hydraulic version. So James Scott had the slip type version as well as the hydraulic version of
Yes.
2 patents.
Yes, James actually continued to register patents for his work right through at least into the 1870s. He died in 1884. And he returned to Scotland to live. Probably he needed more work. He, as I understand it, he had actually bought into a syndicate which was going to raise a steamer that'd gone down off the coast of New Zealand called the William Denny. And he used his various sort of machinery and his overall engineering expertise, and they very nearly brought the ship, the William Denny, up, and then apparently the weather went against them and they lost it again, and I believe he lost money. So it seems that he went back to Scotland to live and probably get work, but he left his adult children here. And no doubt his daughters under the care of their brother Robert Melville Scott, and remarried. And in that period, while he's focusing on New Zealand and the other work in Australia, what had happened was that somehow in Scotland, his control of his own patents had somehow slipped out of his grasp, and a man called Edwin Clark actually was engaged by the company that was building the graving dock at Victoria Dock, the one that John showed you, that was in the jigsaw puzzle. So Clark basically sort of tweaked Scott's patent just a little bit, and was actually paid for his work, for it to be built, the graving docks area at Victoria Dock, to be constructed, and claimed the patent as his own. And somehow word got back to Australia, and James Scott took legal action, and it was actually given, the credit was given to him, and it was written up in lots of a technical publication. But there are illustrations online referring to that construction of Victoria Dock as being Edwin Clark's, but it was not, as James Scott's. And it's a different form of lifting using the hydraulics and a more advanced mechanism, I think we would call it.
Yeah, but there are 2 different concepts. One's slipping and one's lifting vertically with hydraulics. And that was, in the presentation you might have seen the 2 different concepts. But he had both patented, and where this one was a worm drive chains and winches sliding up, the other one was hydraulic rams that lifted the ships vertically out of the water.
Yeah.
And of course all of these against the dry dock, which were later built, generally these were a cheaper version than the necessary work to dig out a big dock. But dry docks then ultimately took over because these were limited to about 3,000 tonnes in ships. Over that they couldn't haul them, they had to put them into dry docks.
I've got a little, I didn't mention this at all, but I will. In Five Dock, we lived in Kings Road and it was Queen's Road. It crossed over Harris Road. You've got Harris Street here. We had Harris Road in Five Dock, and I thought, and this could be a conspiracy theory, so don't go home and say that this guy said this, because I think that the connection is it's the same person that's named both roads. His name was John Harris. You probably all know him anyway. Okay, he was a surgeon and a magistrate. And the Governor King, this is the part that Matthew's in that, you mentioned that one of those books. He said that Governor King gave all this land, which was Drummoyne and Five Dock, to him for services rendered. The whole lot. All that acreage there, which was a lot, okay, came under James Harris. So I can't prove it, but I'll bet me bottom dollar we got the same guy. So that's an interesting point, but okay, don't go home and say that, okay.
Any last questions?
John, you
Yeah.
mentioned Wingala, because I think that's important. We've
Oh,
mentioned
yeah.
Louis and when he lived in North
Yeah,
Belcourt.
there's a suburb in North Kelko, part of North Kelko, but it's now called Wingala. If you go home and look in your street directory, you'll see it. That's where my grandmother, Louis, had land. And she actually, when she developed it, she was too old in her working life to actually make the right decisions, I don't think, about it. So we went there the other day and had a look at it, and it's called Wingala. And of course, the Win is named after my mother, Winsome. So that's the connection. Yes.